TOCFL experience. So to begin with some self-introduction, yes, I'm name is Preston Johnson. I'm from the US. I speak English as my native languages. I don't speak any other languages than English and Mandarin. I'm 24 years old, and I've never taken the HSK before, so I can't really comment on differences between this and the HSK or which one's harder. So my experience studying Chinese. I studied Mandarin in all 4 years of high school as per a requirement from the school, just learn a foreign language. Um, and it was during that time that I did kind of find the inspiration to continue studying, mostly because I had like a generally good experience with my teacher, and I had a lot of other opportunities to kind of get like exposure to the culture, including a trip to Taiwan in my third year of high school. Um, Whenever I went to university, my first year was online because of COVID-19, which is kind of when I encountered my first like difficulties with learning the language. As I'm sure like most people just in general found it harder to be inspired to learn during lockdowns. And I think with not just Mandarin, but any language, it's probably even harder because you get less access to native speakers and less opportunities to practice in real life. So I kind of felt like during that time, a gap that already existed between my reading and listening abilities ended up growing because I was usually better at any activity that involved characters versus ones that were just purely based off of audio. Um, and whenever I was doing the classes online, I had no problem with just like studying more characters. That's what I considered to be the easy part. But whenever you don't have as many opportunities to like interact with native speakers, your speaking and listening abilities will slowly get worse. That being said, in-person classes did resume, but I did eventually have like other periods of time whenever I did not study due to a lack of class availability at my university. This is because most universities in the US have like a standard 4 year track for the Chinese language classes, like Chinese 1, Chinese 2, Chinese 3, Chinese 4. Um, However, because I studied at high school as well, I like tested into Chinese 3 during my first year of university. So I had these like periods I wrote here, like from July to December of 2022, and then March to June. Oh, sorry, from June to December and March to June of 2022 and 2023. Um, so I have also had to like find ways to try to keep learning the language on my own time by like watching various Chinese language content on YouTube or just trying to talk to more native speakers. Um, but eventually it just like became troublesome enough that I realized I just needed to like study abroad if I had any chance at continuing to learn the language. Hence why I studied for 1.5 years at ICLP at National Taiwan University. So this was a particularly important time for my language learning because I had taken essentially everything my university had offered to me, which kind of gave me the false impression that I was at a particularly advanced level. But then when I got to ICLP, I realized that was not the case, as by ICLP standards, I was still at intermediate level. It showed me the amount that I still had left to learn. That being said, I think I still had a good time at ICLP, and it's a very like rigorous environment that will make you learn very fast. Um, and at the same time, the nice thing about attending a language school in Taiwan is that you don't have to worry about other classes. Because like while I was at university, I had like the busy class schedule of a university student. So my language classes were just like one of many. I couldn't dedicate my entire time and energy to learning the languages. I had to do other things. Whereas at ICLP, I could focus entirely on learning the language. So during my time there, I worked my way up from the intermediate level classes up to the more advanced ones. And later, I'll talk a little bit about some of the materials I used while I was at ICLP, or at least my personal favorites. Um, so before that, I can talk a little about the study methods that I used. I find Quizlet to be very useful for studying vocabulary. Not much for other things, but I think it's very good for vocabulary because it can like generate short tests for you where you just have to like look at an English word and translate it into Chinese or vice versa. So for learning vocabulary, especially before an exam, I think Quizlet is useful. Um, in my free time, I like to read news articles, kind of just like follow on what's going on, not just in Taiwan, but everywhere else in the world. And I will usually like find some kind of new term while reading the news articles. And oftentimes I'll even like have bits that are translated into English if it's something, especially that might be like unfamiliar to most readers. Like if it's like maybe some new scientific invention, or sometimes it's a person's name that isn't widely known within Taiwan, but the English name might be known. Um, and also YouTube videos just about life in Taiwan. And what I would recommend is like find some aspect of life that particularly interests you. Like it could be food, culture, travel, etc. Because I feel like you would engage the most with such content rather than it being something about something that just isn't of interest to you. And when you're most engaged with the content, that makes it easier to learn from watching the videos. So like whenever I was just like starting off, I would generally have English subtitles in the videos I was watching, especially like back when I was watching these in high school and in my early years of university. Nowadays, I watch the videos without the English subtitles. They usually just come with Chinese subtitles, like most video content in Taiwan does, like whether it's TV shows, news, YouTube videos, like Chinese subtitles are just a standard feature. You can't really turn them off. So I will still generally take advantage of them because, as I already said, I'm still better at reading than I am at listening. I still try to close that gap though. And I think my time in Taiwan did help me close that gap between my reading abilities and my listening abilities. But anyway, instructional materials at ICLP. So I only included their Chinese names because, like, for most of these, I don't really have good English translations, but these are just the names of some of the textbooks they have. 从媒体看天下，台湾深度观察，思想与社会，听新闻论观点. This last one in particular was good because for this one, the teacher would play audio recordings of news articles, and then we'd have to talk about the articles and then answer questions about the articles in class. And then for 从媒体看天下, there was also a major listening component where we would listen to um, the news reports. There were also like videos on YouTube though, so I could still take advantage of Chinese subtitles, but just the fact that there was this audio element did help me. Oh, and also, most of these are just like ICLP books. I'm not sure if they're offered at any other language schools in Taiwan. Anyway, the TOCFL itself. So, my most recent test was on December 14th. Oh, and I took it in Kaohsiung. I actually live in Taipei, but I was a little bit late for the registration, so none of the Taipei test centers were available. So, I signed up for the one in Kaohsiung instead. And I took the computer adaptive test and earned the following scores. As you can see, I got a 610 out of 700 on listening, 615 for reading, and 1225 overall. All three of which are good enough to get to C1. And yes, I know it looks like the gap between listening and reading is small then because like it's only 5 points, but look at the additional notes at the bottom. This was not my first time taking the TOCFL. During my previous tests, the gap between my listening and reading was much larger. Why did I take the TOCFL? Because I wanted to apply to graduate schools in Taiwan, and a lot of the departments where I was applying had either like B2 or C1 as their minimum proficiency level. That won't always be the case, however. Some of them only require A2 or B1. And also, I just wanted a good measurement of my language skills. Oh, and anyway, back to the additional notes. The first time I took the test, I believe, was in March of 2024, and I did not do nearly as well. Like, I was at B2 on reading and B1 on listening. So that's kind of so my time at ICLP and living in Taiwan certainly helped me improve. Um, but also, I didn't take any mock tests beforehand, so I was pretty unprepared, especially for the listening test, and I'll talk more about that later. Um, oh, and then I also kind of just mention here that there are separate writing and speaking tests, and they are generally less important because graduate schools in Taiwan do not usually require those. They're more of like jiafen. They make you look a little bit better if you submit them, but they are not required. So a quick chart here on how the computer adaptive test is scored. So remember, 700 is the highest one. Level 6 is C2, level 5 is C1, and so on. So getting to C2 is definitely not easy. You have to get almost a perfect score on the reading test. Um, Preparing for the TOCFL. Preparation methods, kind of as I've mentioned already, reading articles online and in books. Oh, and also socialization in Taiwan. That's like talking to people. This was particularly important for improving all my audio based skills like speaking and listening. And also the online mock test, which I mentioned before I first test, I did not do a mock, but then afterwards I would do the mock test to help me prepare. My mood during the test. Nervous. I felt extremely nervous because it's an important test. So I think nervousness is quite natural. And also just from the pictures in the previous presentation, it does kind of look like a very formal environment, which I think can also contribute to feelings of nervousness. It's not really much different from any other time when you take a standardized test, like for example, college admission and other things which to pay attention on the listening test. Like it's make sure that you're feeling nice and energetic before the listening test because it can drain you, especially if you get to band C level questions because those dialogues and the monologues get very long. And also take advantage of the pen and paper you're given and write good notes. And depending on just what's most convenient for you, you could like write your notes in English, write pinyin for them, or write them in Chinese characters, although that might take longer. Pinyin might be good if there's like any unfamiliar words because the answer choices will also be read out loud to you. So you might be lucky enough to write down the pinyin for a keyword that appears in an answer choice. Um, Otherwise, English is probably the best language to use for notes. Oh, and also, for dialogues, you have to keep track of who says what rather than just like the overall content, because it might ask you, like, what did person A say? What did person B say? So I do usually keep like separate columns when writing my notes for like person A and person B. They're easy to distinguish because I'll use like a more masculine voice for one of the dialogue readers and a more feminine voice for the other one. Anyway, the reading test. So for this one, it's a little bit different from the listening test because a listening test has a fixed number of questions, whereas the reading test is a fixed amount of time, being 1 hour. And you have to answer at least 25 questions to get an accurate score. On the reading test, so we kind of went over the test question types already, like general comprehension, fill in the blank, etc. Also, in a lot of Chinese language classes, we learn about like sentence structures and various like transitions to use, and those will be tested on the fill in the blank section. Um, like in one blank, you will want to put in 因为 because 所以 therefore 虽然 even though like that type of question. Or you might also encounter another common thing to encounter is very heavy use of chengyu or idioms in the answer choices, which can make answering certain questions hard because you might actually like know have a general idea of what the answer to a question is, but you don't understand the answer choices because all four of the choices are chengyu. So I would recommend studying like certain Chengyu or idioms before taking the test so that you can make sure you understand the answer choices that you are presented. And now I'm starting to run short on time, so I'll try to finish quickly. Just real quickly, benefits of taking the test. Measures my improvement over the years, as I already, because like I told you how different my test in March of 24 was from December of 2025. Prove my Chinese abilities, applying for graduate schools, and improving self confidence. And other just like general life experiences in Taiwan, because I was going to share that as well. Karaoke is just kind of something fun you can do, um, especially if you like music. And sometimes you can even learn new words from the songs that you sing. Night markets, because that's like hard to find in most other places in the world, especially outside of Asia. And also a round island trip because like some people like to just travel around the entire island in a loop, and I think that's a fun thing you can do in Taiwan and also get better at learning the language, especially if you go to like really like remote areas where the probability of everyone being able to speak English to you becomes lower. Anyway, that's the end of my presentation, so I hope everyone enjoyed that.